Alright guys, so I've been working. I wasn't going to let the GX9 hand pump just sit. Or is it GX or GX9? It might just be GX pump. Okay. Well, this GX pump that I bought, I made some alterations. Alright, so here it is. So this used to house a desiccant and a little filter. The problem with the setup was, okay, you're cleaning the air before you compress it, but the air at atmospheric pressure, you're really not getting the effect of the desiccant really isn't affecting it like if it was under pressure, right? So I took that off. Turns out it's just a tube that goes into this housing and then feeds the air into the chamber. So I tapped that, and after I tapped it, I put a John Guest fitting on it so that I could run conditioned air, conditioned low pressure air, as you see here. I got a couple of refrigerant tanks there. No, I'm not running R22 into anything, although that might be something to test out. A refrigerant propellant. Wonder how many shots you get out of that before it froze everything. Anyway, so I got those two tanks that I've emptied. Well, they were empty. That's the cleanest tank you're going to get. Refrigerant, very clean. So after I've used those bottles, I just tapped the it's a check valve that's in there. So once you screw it out, you got the bottle. And those bottles, normally you just break the valve off and throw them away, but those are super clean bottles, and for 120 psi 150 psi is what I put in them. So I pump air from my air compressor over here. I pump it through. I go through that filter. There's a low filter there, low pressure filter, into this air dryer, which is going to pull the majority of the moisture out of the air. So once it goes through that air dryer, it comes out, goes down around, and I have another setup that I put on here where I can send it into the tanks, but I have to take it off in order to put this on here so that I don't get 150 psi going into the pump, because that just doesn't work. So that is my metering, a metering device, so that I can meter that at however many feet per second or pounds per second of air I want. That I use for nitrogen when I'm brazing and air conditioning. A lot of this stuff is air conditioning, refrigeration parts. So when I'm brazing, I use that to keep the pipe clean, and I just meter nitrogen into the pipe while I'm brazing. That way you don't get the oxidation. So anyway, I'm using it now on my GX. So when I turn that up to about 10, about 10 pounds per inch per second, it'll come in here enough that I can still pump it. So from there, I'm going to go into this filter. Now, normally this air will be dry enough from my refrigerant dryer to go straight into my gun. But just in case, I want to keep pumping to see how much water, if any, I'll get in this thing. So I bought this to further filter and dehydrate the air. So it'll go through that, and then from there, again, before it goes into the gun, I got this. So I'll put that on there. Now what I do with this is I'll stick this in the freezer before I go to fill my gun. So with this being in the freezer, I've got desiccant in here. Well, not desiccant, but what are they called? Those silicone balls. It's a silicate. Kind of the same as desiccant. It's a lower grade, but it does a good job, especially if it's cold. The colder it is, the more dehydration effect you'll get. The droplets will just fall out of it, any droplets in the air. So what I do is I put this thing, I was going to get a big one, but you know, this fits perfectly into my freezer, and I've got desiccant in there. So what I do is I put it in the freezer before I decide to do any pumping, and that way this small filter here will pull out more moisture than your huge desiccant tower, because this is going through pretty fast. So to get the absorption you want, you really want to have that air, you know, go into a cold chamber. So this, I get it nice and cold in the freezer, then it goes, this is the first entry point. This is the last filtration and dehydration point before it goes into the gun. So with this setup, I can use this GX pump and get just as good dehydrated air as I get from my labs. All right, so I've pumped this thing up to, like, you see that? It's like 200 bar. I'm gonna pump it some more, and then we're gonna let the air out of it to see if we've got any moisture. So let's get the setup going here. I just put a cap on this. That'd be messed up if that just popped off all of a sudden. Bust my camera in my hand. I don't know why I think of stuff like that. Murphy's Law. So I'm gonna let air through, and I'm gonna do some pumping. So this right here is just a metering device. So I hear the air hissing. That's just enough air. There's a little weep hole here where the excessive air can come out. But that's just enough air for me to be able to pump. Oh man, that's too much. Let's go down a little. Now, when I first started this, I thought I was going to be able to use this pump as like a second stage compressor and send that air in there at like 150 or 25 psi. Man, you cannot push this thing down with that air coming in there at that pressure. So we brought it up. All right, turn that off. Now, we're gonna bleed this system, see what we got. Because that cylinder there is big enough to where by the time I fill that up, if I start filling my gun at around, well, I got my first rig set at 160. So let's say after I have my second rig set at 100 now. So let's say I start filling at around 110. I start filling at around 110. I probably got about as much air as I've used just to fill that cylinder up. Whew. So I'm just thinking, because it took me a while to fill that cylinder right there. I wish there was like a little valve or something and a check valve on it to where you could just leave that thing filled up. That might have to be something I look into. Check valves. A check valve at least at the outlet of that. Because my pump seems to be able to handle that side of it, but I would like to leave the air that I got in there in that thing and just have a check valve. Well, I guess I could put a check valve here and then a check valve here with a bleeder. That's what I need. Check valve with a bleeder here. That way I could just bleed right there. That way I can leave that tank full of air, because pumping that thing up is no joke. You know, that was almost as bad as pumping my gun. All right, so let's see what we got, y'all. Bleed it. First, let's bleed this here. So we got no water here, which is where I imagine any moisture would be coming out. Right here, you can see I got no moisture. And here, let's see what we got here. That's grease. Let's make some of the grease that's in there, I guess. But no moisture. Did that just break? Cheap. So I found a solution. So that's the solution to the GX pump. I think the better thing about it is that it has that little inlet port that you can tap and make adjustments to. So, because I don't know about the other pumps, but I don't know if I'd be able to run this system like that without being able to tap it. So I can tap that one to make sure the only air getting in the chamber is the air that I've already conditioned. So I'm not getting any outside air in there because I overpressurize it to a point where I'm blowing some of my air out. This system is a lot less wasteful than my what's it called? My Alteros booster. So I got an Alteros booster that I use on the compressor. But this system is a little better than that. Because, well, it's not better because I got to do the pumping. But it wastes less air. I'm not wasting much air at all. With what's bleeding out of that little weep hole, I'm not wasting a whole lot of air. So, seems like a good deal. I may start filling my gun with it again and see what happens. But I think this may be my setup. I may have a setup. All right, y'all. Just wanted to show y'all that. Got the GX system readied up. All right, I'm out. GoPro, stop recording.